I always knew my sister Lila was the visionary, and I was just the backdrop, but I never realized the specific price of my invisibility until I saw the invoice. $12,000. That was the sum she paid a corporate firm to prove I was legally nobody. She was chasing a $3,200,000 investment, and to get it, she decided that erasing her own sister was just the cost of doing business. The rain in Northbridge always seemed to have a personal vendetta against my windshield wipers. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, the kind where the sky turns the color of a bruised plum before settling into an impenetrable charcoal, and I was sitting in traffic on the I-90 bridge. I watched the red taillights blur in front of me, a long, angry snake of commuters just trying to get home. I was 33 years old, and my life felt a lot like this bridge. Sturdy, functional, completely unglamorous, and absolutely necessary for anyone else to get where they were going. I worked as an operations manager for a logistics software company called FreightPath. My job description was a masterclass in ambiguity, but the reality was simple. I fixed things. When the server migration stalled, I was the one on the phone with the vendor at 2 a.m. When the client in Omaha screamed about lost data, I was the one who recovered it and sent the apology gift basket. I was competent. I was cautious. I was the person you called when you wanted to ensure the building didn't burn down, not the person you called when you wanted to light the fireworks to celebrate the construction. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I didn't need to look to know who it was. The customized ringtone, a frantic, high-pitched chime I had ironically set years ago, told me it was my sister, Lila. I let it go to voicemail. I knew the rhythm of these calls. Lila, 3 years my junior, would be in a panic about a vendor contract or a glitch in her user interface. She would talk at 100 miles an hour, breathless with the chaotic energy that everyone called brilliance, and I would listen, absorb the panic, and give her 3 actionable steps to solve the problem. She would say, "You are a lifesaver, Nat," and then hang up. I turned the radio down and listened to the rhythmic thumping of the wipers. It was hard to be jealous of Lila. It was like being jealous of a hurricane. She was a force of nature, blonde, charismatic, and possessing an uncanny ability to make people believe that whatever she was selling was the missing piece of their soul. For the last 4 years, she had been selling Lumina Nest. Lumina Nest? Even the name sounded expensive. It was a wellness tech startup designed to offer tailored mental health and productivity tools for remote workers. It was a brilliant idea, timed perfectly for a workforce that was increasingly lonely and burned out. Everyone said so. My parents, Carol and Dennis, said so at every single family gathering, usually while looking at me with a soft, pitying smile that seemed to say, "We are so glad you have your stable little job. Natalie." I finally merged off the highway and navigated toward my apartment complex. It was a sensible building in a sensible neighborhood, filled with young professionals who, like me, probably had 401k plans and sensible shoes. When I parked, I finally checked the voicemail. "Natalie, pick up." Lila's voice was pitched high, vibrating with adrenaline. "Look, Mom and Dad are taking us to dinner tonight. The Chop House on Main. 7 o'clock. You have to be there. I have big news. Huge. Like, life-changing huge. Don't be late. Love you." I sighed, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. Big news. In the Simmons family dictionary, big news from Lila usually meant she had met a celebrity, decided to move to Bali, or started a new diet. But there was a jagged edge to her voice this time. I went upstairs, changed out of my work blazer into a slightly nicer navy dress, my armor for family dinners, and checked my email. There was a message from Lila sent 3 hours ago with the subject line, "Urgent Ops Question." I opened it. She wanted to know the specific tax implications of hiring contractors in 3 different states. I sat down at my kitchen island. I should have ignored it. I had a full-time job. I had a life, theoretically, but the habit was deep in my marrow. I opened a new tab, pulled up the IRS guidelines I had bookmarked for her 6 months ago, and typed out a concise summary. I hit send, That was the dynamic. It had always been the dynamic. Flashbacks hit me sometimes like sudden headaches. I remembered the kitchen table in our parents' house in Westfield Heights 4 years ago. It was the birth of Lumina Nest, back when it was just a messy pile of index cards and Lila's manic scribbling on a legal pad. I have this vision. Nat, she had said, her eyes wide and shining. People are working from home, right? They are lonely. They are losing their minds. They need a digital nest, a place that organizes their brain but also soothes their anxiety. It sounded like nonsense to me at first, but Lila had a way of making nonsense sound like prophecy. That sounds great. Lila, I had said, sipping my coffee. But how do you monetize it? Is it a subscription model? Is it ad-based? What is the burn rate? She had waved her hand dismissively. The details don't matter yet. The vision matters. But the details did matter, and because I couldn't stand to watch her fail, I made them matter. Over the next 6 months, while Lila went to networking mixers and pitched her vision to anyone who would listen, I sat at that kitchen table night after night. I was the one who went to the Secretary of State website and registered the LLC because Lila forgot. I was the one who researched the health privacy regulations, HIPAA compliance, and data security standards, realizing that if she wasn't careful, she would be sued into oblivion before she launched. I remembered one night specifically. It was 2 a.m. Lila had come home from a party, buzzing with excitement because she had met a graphic designer who wanted to do the logo. I was surrounded by stacks of paper, competitor analyses, draft process documents, and a terrifying spreadsheet of projected expenses. "You are amazing." "Nat," she had said, draping her arms around my neck, smelling of white wine and expensive perfume. "Seriously, I couldn't do this without you." I had looked up, rubbing my tired eyes. "We need to talk about structure. Lila, if I am doing all the operations work, we need to formalize it. We will." She had squeezed my shoulders. "I promise. Once we get real money, once we are not just scraping by on Mom and Dad's loan, we will work out your equity. This is our company. Nat, you and me, the Simmons sisters taking over the world. Our company." I held on to that phrase. I filed it away in the same mental cabinet where I kept the memories of buying the domain name with my own credit card, because Lila's was maxed out. And the weeks I spent drafting the employee handbook for the first 3 hires she made. Back in the present. I grabbed my purse and headed out to the Chop House. The restaurant was one of those places that tried too hard to be atmospheric, resulting in lighting so dim you needed a flashlight to read the menu and acoustics that amplified the clatter of silverware into a cacophony. My parents were already seated at a circular booth in the back, flanking Lila like royal guards. Carol, my mother, was wearing her pearl necklace, the one she saved for weddings and graduations. Dennis, my father, was beaming, his face flushed with a mixture of pride and the scotch he was already nursing. "There she is," Dennis boomed as I approached, the reliable Natalie. Right on time, as always. "Hi, Dad," I said, kissing his cheek. "Hi, Mom." Carol reached out and patted my hand, her gaze immediately sliding past me to Lila. "You look tired. Natalie, are you drinking enough water?" "You know, Lila sent me this wonderful article about hydration and cognitive function from the Lumina Nest blog. You should read it." "I am fine." "Mom," I said, sliding into the booth next to Lila. "Hi, Lila." Lila was vibrating. That was the only word for it. She was wearing a sleek black dress that looked brand new, and her hair was blown out to perfection. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. "I am so glad you came," she said. "I couldn't do this without the whole family here." "Do what?" I asked, unfolding my napkin. She waited until the waiter had poured champagne for everyone, even me, and I rarely drank on weeknights. Lila stood up, tapping her glass with a fork. The sound cut through the noise of the restaurant. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can finally say it out loud. For the last 3 months, I have been in talks with a silent partner, a major investor. We have been going back and forth on valuation, vision, and the future of the company. My parents held their breath. I felt a sudden spike of adrenaline. This was it. This was the real money she had talked about years ago. Lila took a deep breath. As of this afternoon, we have a term sheet. Lumina Nest has secured a commitment of $3,200,000. Dennis slammed his hand on the table. Yes, that is my girl. Carol let out a little squeal of delight, clapping her hands. Oh, Lila, I knew it. I knew you were going to be a star. $3,200,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and golden. It is pending final due diligence, Lila added quickly, looking at me. But the money is committed. It is happening. This values the company at, well, let's just say I am going to be in a different tax bracket. I smiled. I genuinely smiled. Despite everything. Despite the late nights and the ungratefulness. I was proud. I knew how hard the market was. That is incredible. Lila, I said, really, I know how much work went into this. Lila beamed at me, but her eyes didn't quite lock with mine. They skittered away. Thanks, Nat. It is wild. So, Dennis said, leaning forward, tell us about the partner. Who is it? I can't say, Lila said, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Strictly confidential. They are a family office. Very high net worth. Based out of the East Coast. They like to stay in the shadows. But they believe in me. That is what they said. They believe in the founder. She paused, and I waited. I waited for the sentence that would acknowledge the reality of the last 4 years. I waited for her to say, and they were impressed by the operational backbone Natalie built. Or, now I can finally pay Natalie back for all those startup costs. Or even just, and now the Simmons sisters can really get to work. I told them, Lila continued, her voice swelling with dramatic flair, that I built this from nothing, just me, a laptop, and a vision. I told them about the sleepless nights where it was just me against the world. They loved the story. The solo female founder narrative is huge right now. They said I have the grit of 10 men. My smile froze. It didn't drop. It just calcified. Solo founder. Carol wiped a tear from her eye. You always were independent. Lila, even as a little girl, you never needed anyone's help. That is not true, I said. The words came out quieter than I intended. Everyone looked at me. What, honey? Carol asked, frowning slightly. I cleared my throat. My heart hammering against my ribs, I said. That is not entirely true. Lila had help. Lila's smile tightened. Her eyes flashed with a warning. Of course, she said, a little too loudly. I had emotional support. You guys were great. I mean the work. Lila, I said, keeping my voice steady, the incorporation, the compliance framework, the operational workflows, the first 2 years of bookkeeping. Dennis laughed, a booming, dismissive sound. Oh, come on. Natalie, don't be petty. We are celebrating your sister's millions. You helped her with some paperwork. That is what big sisters do. It wasn't just paperwork. Dad, I said, it was the foundation of the company. Lila set her glass down. The champagne sloshed over the rim. Natalie, please, not now. Do not make this about you. This is the biggest night of my life. I am not making it about me, I said, fighting the nausea rising in my throat. I am surprised you pitched it as a solo effort. You told me we were partners. You said when real money came, we would formalize my equity. The table went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Carol looked at me with open disappointment. Natalie, really, you are going to bring up money now? When your sister just achieved the impossible? That is so grasp. Lila looked at me. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was pitying. It was the look you give a child who doesn't understand how the adult world works. Nat, she said softly. That was years ago. We were just talking. There is nothing on paper. You know that. Investors don't like messy cap tables. They want a clean founder structure. If I had walked in there and said, "Oh, My sister did some spreadsheets 3 years ago, so she owns 20%. They would have laughed me out of the room. Some spreadsheets. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the diamond studs in her ears. I saw the ambition that had consumed everything else, including the truth. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even an employee. I was a utility, and utilities are supposed to be invisible. "Let's order," Dennis said, breaking the tension. "I want the ribeye, and another bottle of this champagne." "To Lila. To Lila," Carol echoed. I raised my glass. "To Lila," I whispered. The rest of the dinner was a blur of noise and forced laughter. I ate my salmon without tasting it. I nodded when spoken to. I played the role they had written for me, the quiet, supportive background character who didn't make waves. When the check finally came, Lila grabbed it with a flourish. "Company expense," she declared. We walked out to the parking garage together. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and cold. The concrete smelled of oil and exhaust. "Natalie, wait up," Lila called out as I reached my car. I turned around. My parents were already driving away, their taillights disappearing down the ramp. Lila was standing there, clutching her purse and a thick manila envelope. "Look," she said, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "I am sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to snap. The pressure has just been insane. You have no idea what due diligence is like. They go through everything with a microscope. I am sure," I said, unlocking my car. "Congratulations, Lila. $3 million is a lot of money." "It is $3.2 million, she corrected automatically. "Listen, Nat, there is one small thing." She held out the envelope. "Because the investor is so strict, like paranoid level strict, they need to make sure there are no loose ends. Intellectual property claims, disgruntled ex-contractors, that kind of thing." I looked at the envelope. "Loose ends. What is this?" I asked. "It is just standard cleanup paperwork," she said, her smile bright and brittle. "A formality. Basically, it just says that you don't have any claim to the IP or the company assets, since, you helped out in the beginning but were never an employee." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp garage air. "You want me to sign a waiver?" She laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. "Don't call it that. It sounds so serious. It is just confirmation. Confirmation that you are my sister who loves me and helped me. Not a litigant waiting in the bushes." She pressed the envelope into my hands. It felt heavy. "I need it back by tomorrow morning," she said. "The lawyers need to file it before the wire transfer can be authorized. You will do this for me, right? For the family?" I looked at her face. It was the same face that had begged me to write her history papers in high school. The same face that had asked me to lie to Mom about where she was on prom night. "I will look at it," I said. "Thanks, Nat. You are the best." She leaned in, kissed the air near my cheek, and hurried toward her BMW. I watched her drive away, the exhaust hanging in the air like a phantom. I drove home in silence. My apartment was dark when I arrived. I didn't turn on the lights. I just walked to the kitchen island, the same place where I had incorporated Luminanest 4 years ago, and turned on the small lamp. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly. Then I opened the envelope. It wasn't just a waiver. It was a fortress of legal language. Mutual release and waiver of claims, assignment of intellectual property, confidentiality and non-disparagement agreement. I skimmed the pages. It was brutal. It stated that I, Natalie Simmons, had no rights, no title, and no interest in Luminanest. It stated that any work I had performed was voluntary and gratuitous. It stated that I would never speak of my contributions publicly. Then I saw the cover letter. It was on the letterhead of Alder and Brackett, a corporate law firm I recognized as one of the most expensive in the city. Due Diligence Matters /N. Simmons. I read the text. It was standard legal boilerplate until I got to the billing summary attached to the back. It must have been included by mistake. Stapled to the packet by an overworked paralegal. Retainer for services rendered. $12,000. Service description. Strategic counsel and document preparation regarding Miss Natalie Simmons' purported involvement and risk mitigation. $12,000. She had paid a law firm $12,000 to draft this. She hadn't offered me a cent for my work. She hadn't offered me a token 1% equity. She had spent $12,000 to ensure I got nothing. I felt sick, physically sick. I flipped to the very last page of the packet. It was a scanned copy of a document list, and there, scrawled in the margin, was a handwritten note. It was Lila's handwriting. I knew that loop on the L anywhere. It was a note to her attorney, likely written on a draft, and scanned into the system inadvertently. I brought the paper closer to the lamp, squinting through the sudden blur of tears. Make sure this is airtight. I need you to prove she's legally nobody to Lumina Nest, so my investor doesn't freak out. She will sign whatever I tell her to. I stared at the words, prove she's legally nobody. The paper shook in my hand. The silence of my apartment, usually a comfort, suddenly felt like a tomb. I wasn't just a sister. I wasn't just a helper. To Lila, and to the $3,200,000 future she was buying, I was a liability. I was a stain that needed to be bleached out. Nobody. I set the paper down on the counter. I looked at the dark window, seeing my own reflection, a woman who had spent her life making sure everyone else was safe, organized, and successful. $12,000 to erase me. I didn't cry. The tears that had threatened to fall evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest. I reached for my phone. But I didn't call Lila. I didn't call my parents. I just sat there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, while the word nobody echoed in my head, getting louder and louder until it sounded less like an insult and more like a challenge. They wanted me to be nobody. God help them. I thought, touching the cool paper, I might just have to show them exactly who nobody is. The paper cut on my thumb was stinging, a sharp, throbbing reminder of the night before, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I sat on my living room floor at 3 a.m, surrounded by the debris of my own doubt. The manila envelope lay open like a dissected animal, its contents spilled across the beige carpet. I had read the waiver 14 times. I had read the cover letter 20 times. But I had read Lila's handwritten note, I need you to prove she's legally nobody, until the words lost their meaning and became just a collection of loops and slashes in blue ink. Nobody. The apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional hiss of a passing car on the wet pavement outside. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the kitchen table from 4 years ago. I saw Lila's desperate face, begging me to figure out the payroll tax structure because she didn't understand the difference between a W-2 and a 1099. I heard my own voice, patient and tired, explaining it for the 3rd time. Was I crazy? The thought crept in, insidious and cold. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was rewriting history to make myself feel important. I looked at the legal documents again. They were so official, so crisp, drafted by Alder and Brackett on bonded paper that felt like money. They stated, in authoritative black text, that my contributions were voluntary, gratuitous, that I was a bystander who had offered a helping hand, like a neighbor helping to move a couch, not a co-founder who had helped build the house. I curled my knees to my chest. Maybe I was just the supportive big sister. Maybe expecting equity for setting up the entire operational back end of a company was greedy. Maybe I was jealous. Just like Dad always joked. Natalie the plotter, Lila the star. I picked up the waiver. All I had to do was sign it. If I signed it, the tension would vanish. Lila would get her $3,200,000. My parents would be happy. We would have Christmas dinner, and everyone would smile. And I would continue to be the good, reliable Natalie who didn't cause trouble. But then I looked at the invoice again. $12,000. Lila had spent $12,000 of company money I had helped her save by setting up her budget trackers, to hire a lawyer to make sure I couldn't claim a dime. She didn't ask me to sign a waiver because she loved me. She paid a hitman in a suit to assassinate my character before I even knew I was in the crosshairs. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the sun come up, turning the sky a pale, sickly gray, and then I showered, put on my armor, a charcoal blazer and slacks, and went to work. Freight Path was a sanctuary of logic. Boxes moved from point A to point B. Data streams were consistent. If there was an error, you traced the code, found the bug, and fixed it. There were no emotional variables. I sat at my desk, staring at a logistics map of the Midwest, but the lines blurred into the text of the waiver. "You look like you saw a ghost," a voice said. I looked up. Marcus was leaning against the cubicle wall, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Marcus was one of the senior developers, a guy with salt and pepper hair and a bullshit detector that was calibrated to the nanometer. We had bonded 3 years ago over a shared hatred of inefficiency and a love for obscure sci-fi novels. I took the coffee he offered. I didn't mean to tell him. I was a private person. I kept my family mess behind a firewall. But the lack of sleep and the sheer weight of the humiliation cracked me open. "Can I ask you a hypothetical question?" I asked, my voice raspy. Marcus pulled up a chair and sat down, his expression shifting from casual to attentive. "I love hypotheticals. Shoot, hypothetically. Say you helped a friend start a company. You did the legal filings, the ops setup, the hiring protocols. You worked nights and weekends for 2 years. There was no contract, just a verbal promise of partnership." He nodded slowly. "Okay. Common startup horror story so far. Go on." Then, 4 years later, the company gets a massive investment. $3 million massive. And the friend hands you a legal document saying you never did anything. You have no rights, and you need to sign away your existence so the deal goes through. Oh, and you find out they paid a lawyer $12,000 to specifically craft a strategy to erase you. Marcus stared at me. The office noise, the clicking keyboards, the low murmur of sales calls seemed to fade. He didn't ask if it was hypothetical. He knew. "Natalie," he said, his voice low and hard. "Do not sign that paper. It is my sister," I whispered, looking down at the steam rising from the coffee. "She says it is just a formality for the investors. She says if I don't sign, the deal falls apart. That is manipulation. Plain and simple," Marcus said. He leaned in closer. "Listen to me. I have been in this industry for 20 years. I have seen founders screw over everyone from their college roommates to their own spouses. If they are asking you to sign a retroactive waiver, it means they know you have a claim. If you were truly nobody, they wouldn't need your signature. They paid $12,000, I said, the number feeling heavy on my tongue. To prove I am nobody, that is not a formality, Marcus said. That is a preemptive strike. That is a weapon. He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving mine. You need leverage. You need to stop thinking like a sister and start thinking like an operations manager. Where is the data? The data? Emails, texts, drafts, metadata. Marcus ticked them off on his fingers. A verbal contract is hard to prove, but a paper trail is immortal. Did you use your personal email? Yes. Did you save the files? I think so. On my old laptop. Marcus nodded grimly. Go home. Tonight. Dig everything up. Every hour you worked. Every dollar you spent. Every promise she made. Do not talk to her. Do not sign anything. And for the love of God, get a lawyer who isn't on her payroll. I left work early that day. I told my boss I had a migraine, which wasn't entirely a lie. My head was pounding with the pressure of the impending confrontation. When I got home, I went straight to the closet in the hallway. I dug through a box of old cables and electronics until I found it, my old silver laptop, the one I had used during the first 2 years of Lumina Nest. It was heavy and battered, with a sticker on the lid that said, Organize or Die. I plugged it in and waited for it to boot up. The fan whirred loudly, a sound from a different era of my life. When the desktop finally appeared, I felt a strange sense of time travel. The background was a photo of me and Lila at the beach. 5 years ago, we looked so happy, so united. I opened the file explorer. I typed Lumina into the search bar, The screen filled with results. Hundreds of them. Lumina _bizplan _V1 _Natalie _edits docx Lumina _up agreement _draft PDF expense projections 2022.x LSX market research mental health V3 .pptx. I clicked on a folder labeled Process Docs. Inside were 42 files. Hiring flows, onboarding checklists, vendor vetting protocols, customer service scripts. I opened one at random, a flowchart for handling user data privacy. I right-clicked and hit Properties. Created November 12, 2021, 2:14 a.m. Author, Natalie Simmons. I sat back, staring at the screen. There it was. Proof that I wasn't a hallucination. Proof that while Lila was sleeping or partying, I was building the engine that made her car run. I switched to my email archive. I searched for the word equity. There were dozens of threads, mostly vague allusions. But then I found it. An email from Lila, dated January 15th, 2022. The subject line was, "You are a goddess." I opened it. "Nat, I am literally crying right now. That pitch deck structure you built is genius. I don't know what I would do without you. Seriously, I know I am the face of this thing, but you are the brain. Once we land serious funding, we will formalize your stake. I promise. This is our company. We are going to be rich. Big sis, love you. This is our company." I took a screenshot, then I printed it. Then I saved it to a USB drive. I spent the next 4 hours excavating my own life. I found the receipt for the domain registration. Paid with my Visa card. I found the invoice for the first graphic designer, which I had paid because Lila's card was declined. I found a Slack log where I trained the first 3 employees on the software I had configured. By 8 o'clock, I had a stack of paper an inch thick. It wasn't just a binder. It was an autobiography of my exploitation. I needed to see my parents. I knew it was a bad idea. I knew they would take Lila's side. But some childish part of me still wanted to believe that if I just showed them the evidence, if I just laid the truth on the table, they would see me. They would say, "Oh, Natalie, we didn't know. We are sorry." I drove to Westfield Heights. The house looked the same as always. A sprawling colonial with manicured hedges and a wreath on the door that changed with the seasons. It smelled of potpourri and lemon polish when I walked in. Carol was in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. "Natalie," she said, looking surprised. "We weren't expecting you. Did you leave your coat in the car?" "It is chilly tonight." I didn't answer. I walked over to the island and set the manila envelope, the waiver, down on the granite counter. "We need to talk about this." "Mom," I said. Carol sighed, snipping the stem of a hydrangea. "Oh, Natalie, not this again. Lila told me you were being difficult about the paperwork." "Difficult?" I felt my voice rising. "Mom, she wants me to sign away my rights. She wants me to say I did nothing." Carol put the shears down. She looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. "Natalie, look at the big picture. Lila is on the verge of something spectacular. This investor, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Why do you have to make everything so transactional?" "Because it is a transaction," I said. "She is selling the company. My company, too." Carol laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. "Your company?" "Honey, you helped her with some spreadsheets. You were a good big sister. That is what families do. We help each other. We don't send invoices to our siblings." I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed email. The one where Lila said, "This is our company. Read this. Mom, she promised me. She said when the money came, we would be partners." Carol barely glanced at the paper. She waved it away. That was years ago. People say things when they are excited. It doesn't mean she owes you millions of dollars. That is just greed. Natalie, it is ugly. Greed? I stared at her. I worked for 2 years for free. I paid her bills. I built her systems. And she appreciates it, Carol insisted. But this is business. This is how business works. The person with the vision gets the reward. The people who help, well, they get the satisfaction of helping. Why can't you just be happy for her? Why are you so jealous? The word hit me like a slap. Jealous. I am not jealous, I said, my voice shaking. I am used. The front door opened. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor. Lila walked into the kitchen, wearing a beige trench coat and holding a takeout coffee cup. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes darting to the papers on the counter. "Oh," she said, "you are here." I turned to her. "Lila, we need to talk about the lawyer." Lila rolled her eyes, walking past me to kiss Carol on the cheek. "Hi, Mom, Nat. Seriously? You came here to tattle on me? I came here to understand why you paid a law firm $12,000 to prove I am nobody." I said. Lila froze. She turned slowly to face me. "How do you know about that?" "I saw the invoice," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "You went through my emails? You sent it to me." I lied. Or at least, I let her believe it. It doesn't matter. Is that what I am to you? A liability? Lila sighed. Dropping the act, she leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "Look, Nat, you are blowing this out of proportion. The investors, they are paranoid, okay? They are obsessed with clean cap tables. If they see a sister lurking in the background who did some filing 3 years ago, they panic. They think it is going to be a messy family lawsuit. So you decided to erase me to make them comfortable? I am protecting the deal," Lila shouted, her composure cracking. "This is $3 million. Natalie, do you have any idea what I can do with that? I can change the world. I can build something huge. And you are going to ruin it because you want— what? A pat on the back? Some cash? I want what is fair," I said quietly. "Fair is what the market decides," Lila snapped. "And the market says I am the founder. Me, not us. If I don't sign?" I asked. Lila's face softened. She stepped closer, reaching for my hand. The anger vanished, replaced by a terrifyingly effective vulnerability. "Nat, please, if you don't sign, the due diligence fails. They walk away. The company dies. All those employees, they lose their jobs. I lose everything. Is that what you want? Do you want to destroy me?" She squeezed my hand. I know the wording in the waiver is harsh. Lawyers are jerks. But I promise, once the deal closes, I will take care of you. I will write you a check, a gift, under the table. But I can't put you on the cap table. It kills the deal. I looked at her. I looked at my mother, who was nodding encouragingly. "Just sign it. Honey," Carol said. "Don't be the reason your sister fails." I pulled my hand away. "Who is the partner?" I asked. Lila blinked. "What?" "The silent partner." "Who are they? If they are so paranoid, I want to know who I'm dealing with." "I told you," Lila said, her eyes shifting away. "It is confidential. An ultra-high net worth family office. What is the name?" She hesitated. "It is a group based out of East Coast Harbor." That is all I can say. East Coast Harbor. It sounded vague, evasive. "I am not signing anything tonight," I said. Lila's face hardened. "Then you are being selfish. You are putting your ego above my entire life." I grabbed my purse. I grabbed the waiver. I didn't say goodbye to my mother. I walked out of the house, the smell of potpourri sticking to my clothes like a shroud. I drove home with the radio off. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Selfish, jealous, nobody. When I got back to my apartment, I sat down at my computer again. I needed to organize. I needed to make sense of the chaos. I opened my personal email. There was a new message in my inbox. It was from the shared family email account. Simmons Family Connect Gmail ... We used it for planning reunions and sharing Netflix passwords. Lila used it sometimes when her phone died or she couldn't access her work server. The subject line was FWD, invoice 40,992, Alder bracket, Urgent payment required. It must have been an auto-forward rule she set up ages ago to send billing notifications to herself, and she had accidentally CC'd the family group. Or maybe she had logged in from the family iPad and forgotten to switch accounts. I opened it. It wasn't just the summary I had seen on the cover letter, it was the detailed breakdown. Client, Lumina Nest, Inc., Matter, N., Simmons Risk Mitigation. Date, October 22nd. Service, review of historical communications with N. Simmons to identify potential implied contract risks. Service, drafting of total severance waiver to preclude IP claims. Service, strategy session regarding narrative control, framing N. Simmons as familial support rather than foundational contributor. Deliverable, memorandum demonstrating minimal legal and reputational exposure posed by Ms. Simmons. Total, $12,450. I stared at the screen. Narrative control, implied contract risks. They knew I had a claim. They knew it was real. That was why they were spending a fortune to bury it. Lila wasn't paranoid. She was guilty. And she was using the best lawyers in the city to gaslight me into believing I was crazy. I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach. The sadness evaporated. The desire for my mother's approval vanished. I stood up and went to my bookshelf. I pulled out a fresh 3-ring binder. I grabbed a pack of sticky notes and a highlighter. I started printing. I printed the Our Company email. I labeled it Exhibit A. I printed the metadata screenshots of the process documents. Exhibit B. I printed the bank statements showing the domain purchase and the freelancer payments. Exhibit C. Money fronted. I printed the Slack logs. Exhibit D. I punched holes in the pages with a rhythmic crunch, crunch, crunch. It was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I organized the documents chronologically, building a timeline of the truth, page by page. I reconstructed my reality. I wasn't nobody. I was the architect, and I had the blueprints to prove it. At 2 a.m, I finally closed the binder. It was solid, heavy. I wrote Lumina Nest, truth on the spine in black marker. I opened my laptop one last time and searched for small business attorneys in Northbridge. I found a woman named Lucia Heron. Her website was simple, no flash, just a bio that said she specialized in partnership disputes and corporate divorce. I filled out the contact form. Message: I am a co-founder who has been erased from my company. I have documentation. I have been presented with a waiver to sign under duress. I need to know my rights. I hit send. Then I checked my bank account. I had $5,000 in my emergency fund. It was supposed to be for a new car or a medical crisis. I transferred it all to my checking account. This was an emergency. I was fighting for my life, not my physical life, but the life I had actually lived, the life they wanted to steal. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain start up again. I thought about Lila's face when she said, "Love you." I thought about the words, "Prove she's legally nobody." I rolled over and looked at the binder sitting on my nightstand. "You want a nobody?" I whispered to the dark room. "You got one, but you are going to wish you had hired a better lawyer." The office of Lucia Heron was nothing like the glass and steel fortress of Alder and Brackett. It was located on the second floor of a refurbished brick building in downtown Northbridge, sandwiched between a graphic design studio and a boutique coffee roaster. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and old paper. The waiting room had 2 comfortable armchairs and a pile of Fortune magazines that were 6 months old. I sat on the edge of one of the chairs, clutching my binder so hard my knuckles had turned white. I felt like a student waiting to be called into the principal's office, or perhaps a patient waiting for a diagnosis that would confirm whether I was crazy or terminal. "Natalie?" I looked up. Lucia Heron stood in the doorway. She was older than I expected, maybe in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes framed by red glasses and a messy bun that suggested she was too busy fighting battles to worry about hairpins. "Come on in," she said. Her office was cluttered but organized, stacks of files covering every surface of her wooden desk. I sat down and placed my binder in the center of the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. I spent the next 40 minutes talking. I started from the beginning. The kitchen table. The late nights. The promises. I told her about the operations manual I wrote from scratch. I told her about the domain registration I paid for. I told her about the dinner, the waiver, and the invoice for $12,000. Lucia listened without interrupting. She didn't nod sympathetically or make soothing noises. She just watched me, her eyes moving occasionally to the binder as I flipped through the exhibits. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Lucia leaned forward and pulled the binder toward her. She opened it to the first page. The screenshot of the email where Lila had written, "This is our company." She adjusted her glasses. "You were thorough," she said. "That is good. Most people come in here with nothing but hurt feelings and a few angry text messages. This is evidence. Is it enough?" I asked, my voice tight. "Do I have a leg to stand on?" Lucia flipped a page. "It is complicated. Natalie, without a signed operating agreement or a founder's restricted stock purchase agreement, you are in a gray area. The law likes clarity. It likes signatures on dotted lines. But the law also recognizes that people make agreements in informal ways, especially families." She tapped the email with her index finger. "This creates a strong argument for what we call a partnership by estoppel, or an implied contract. She made a promise. We will formalize your stake. And you relied on that promise to perform substantive work. You gave her labor and intellectual property in exchange for a future equity grant that she never delivered. That is a claim. It is messy. And it would be a fight. But it is a claim." She kept flipping through the pages, her eyes scanning the metadata reports I had printed. Suddenly, she stopped. She squinted at a document I hadn't paid much attention to, a printout of the initial LLC name reservation request from the Secretary of State's website. "Wait a minute," she muttered. She turned to her computer and typed rapidly. I watched her reflection in the window behind her desk. "Interesting," she said, spinning her chair back around. "Did you know you are listed as the primary contact on the provisional project registration?" I blinked. "I am?" Lucia turned the monitor so I could see. There, on the screen, was a cached version of a freelancer platform profile Lila had set up to hire our first developer. Under company representative, it didn't say Lila Simmons, it said Natalie Simmons. And here, she pointed to another document in my binder. The LLC name reservation. The contact email isn't Lila's. It is yours, Natalie Simmons, ops@gmail.com. I remembered that email address. I had created it because Lila's inbox was a disaster zone, and we needed a central place for official correspondence. Lucia looked at me, a small, grim smile playing on her lips. "You weren't just a helper, Natalie. In the eyes of these third-party systems, you were the face of the administration. You were acting with executive authority. That makes it much harder for her to argue you were just a supportive sister bringing coffee." She closed the binder and leaned back, clasping her hands. "Here's the reality. This waiver she wants you to sign, it is a death sentence for your rights. If you sign this, you are agreeing that everything you did was a gift. You are waiving your right to sue, your right to speak, and your right to ever claim a penny. You are effectively legally euthanizing your role in the company." I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. "And that $12,000 she spent?" Lucia continued, her voice hardening. "That is not standard paperwork. You don't pay a firm like Alder and Brackett $12,000 to draft a generic release. You pay them that kind of money to build a firewall. They know you have a claim. Natalie, they are terrified of it. That invoice is the smoking gun that proves they perceive you as a material threat to the deal. So what do I do?" I asked. "The investor is waiting. Lila says, if I don't sign, the deal dies." Lucia looked at me with piercing clarity. "That is a leverage tactic. It is a game of chicken. They are betting that your guilt is stronger than your self-respect. If you refuse to sign, yes, it creates a problem for them. It forces them to disclose the dispute to the investor, but it also forces them to the table. If you sign, you get nothing. If you don't sign, you have a voice. She pushed the binder back to me. My advice? Do not sign. Go home. Let them sweat. If they want your signature that badly, they can pay for it. Not with a gift under the table, but with a formal settlement or the equity you were promised. I walked out of the brick building into the bright afternoon sun, feeling a strange mixture of nausea and power. For 4 years, I had been the invisible hand that kept the machinery running. Now, for the first time, someone had looked at the machinery and acknowledged that I had built it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I stopped on the sidewalk, shielding my eyes from the glare. I expected a text from Lila, demanding to know where the waiver was. It was an email. The sender was E. Park. The subject line was confidential/inquiry regarding Lumina Nest. I frowned. I didn't know anyone named Park. I opened the message. Dear Ms. Simmons, my name is Eleanor Park, and I serve as General Counsel for Harborline Capital. We are currently in the final stages of due diligence regarding a potential investment in Lumina Nest Incorporated. During our review of the company's early documentation and intellectual property chain of title, your name has appeared in several key operational capacities. Given the pending nature of our transaction, I would appreciate a brief conversation to clarify your historical role in the Lumina Nest project and ensure our records are complete. Are you available for a brief call this afternoon? Please let me know the best number to reach you. Regards, Eleanor Park, Harborline Capital. My stomach dropped through the floor. Harborline Capital. That was the name. The secret investor. Lila had refused to tell me. She had hidden it behind the vague East Coast Family Office label. But now they were in my inbox. They had found me. Lucia's words echoed in my head. They know you have a claim. They are terrified of it. My fingers hovered over the screen. If I answered this, I was crossing the Rubicon. Lila would see it as an act of war. But if I ignored it, was I just letting the erasure happen? Was I proving Lila right? That I was nobody? I took a deep breath. I walked to a wooden bench near the riverfront. Away from the traffic noise, the water was gray and choppy, moving fast. I typed a reply. Ms. Park, I am available now. You can reach me at this number. I hit send. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. The area code was from Boston. Hello, this is Natalie. Ms. Simmons, thank you for taking the time. The voice was cool, precise, and undeniably authoritative. It wasn't the frantic energy of Lila or the dismissive tone of my mother. It was the voice of someone who moved millions of dollars around like chess pieces. I am Eleanor Park, she said. I am calling on behalf of Harborline Capital. As I mentioned, we are looking into the structural history of Lumina Nest. Our team noticed your name on several early filings and domain registrations, as well as some metadata in the data room provided by the company. She paused. I held my breath. We understand from the founder, Lila Simmons, that your involvement was informal, familial support. Is that an accurate characterization? I looked at the river. I could lie. I could say yes. I could save Lila right now. I could be the good sister. It started that way, I said carefully, but it evolved. Could you elaborate? Eleanor asked. I closed my eyes. I did the operational setup. I said, my voice trembling slightly before finding its footing. I drafted the initial process documents. I set up the compliance framework for the user data. I handled the freelancer hiring for the first 18 months. It wasn't just bringing coffee. It was building the infrastructure. I see, Eleanor said. Her tone didn't change, but I heard the click of a keyboard in the background. She was taking notes. And was there an understanding regarding compensation for this work? There was a verbal agreement. I said, Lila promised me equity. She said when the company received funding, my stake would be formalized. She said it was our company. There was a long silence on the other end. The wind whipped hair across my face, but I didn't move to brush it away. Ms. Simmons, Eleanor said finally, I want to be transparent with you. Harborline Capital is very interested in the product your sister has built. However, we have a strict policy regarding active intra-family disputes. We do not invest in companies with clouded titles or unresolved litigation risks. She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle on me. Do you consider yourself a current stakeholder in Lumina Nest? Do you intend to pursue a claim? This was it, the question that would decide everything. I don't want to destroy the company, I said, and I meant it. I don't want to hurt Lila. I want Lumina Nest to succeed. I am proud of it. But I was sent a waiver yesterday that asked me to state I did nothing. I was asked to lie. And I found out that company funds were used to hire lawyers to discredit me. I feel betrayed. I don't want to block the deal, Ms. Park, but I don't want to be erased. I just want what is fair. I don't want to be coerced into saying I am nobody. The keyboard clicking stopped. For a moment, I thought she had hung up. The silence stretched, filled only by the rush of the river and the thumping of my own heart. Then Eleanor spoke, and her voice was different. The cool, corporate veneer had cracked. Just a fraction. Thank you for your candor. Ms. Simmons, she said, it is rare in my line of work. Most people in your position would have either lied to protect the deal or threatened to burn it down to extract a payout. You did neither. She cleared her throat. Harborline Capital looks at the product, yes, but we also look at the people. Character matters to us. Ms. Simmons, more than most founders realize, we will take your statement into consideration. Wait, I said, panic flaring. What does that mean? Is the deal off? I cannot discuss our internal deliberations, she said, her professional armor sliding back into place, but I appreciate you clarifying the record. Have a good afternoon. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. Character matters. I drove back to my apartment in a daze. I felt drained, hollowed out. I had told the truth, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I had just pulled a pin on a grenade and rolled it into my sister's living room. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. I needed to lie down. I needed to turn off my brain. But as I reached for my doorknob, I heard it. The sound of rapid, heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs behind me. I turned around. Lila was sprinting up the final flight. Her face flushed a blotchy, furious red. Her hair was wild, flying around her face, and her eyes were wide with a terrified rage I had never seen before. You, she screamed, the word echoing in the narrow hallway. Lila? I said, stepping back against my door. She reached the landing and lunged at me, not physically hitting me, but getting so close I could smell the stale coffee and panic on her breath. She waved her phone in my face. You talk to them. You talk to Harborline. How do you... I started. Eleanor's associate CC'd me. Lila shrieked. Per our conversation with Ms. Natalie Simmons regarding historical claims, I got the email 5 minutes ago. What did you say to them? What did you do? I told the truth. I said, gripping my keys tight. The truth? Lila laughed, a high, hysterical sound. You poisoned the well. That is what you did. You went behind my back and you poisoned my investor. I didn't go behind your back. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They contacted me. They knew. Lila. They found my name on the documents you tried to hide. Because of you, she yelled. Because you couldn't just sign the damn paper. You had to play the martyr. She paced the small landing, running her hands through her hair. Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you? It is not just me, Natalie. It is the team. It is Marcus. It is Sarah. It is 12 people with mortgages and kids. Don't bring Marcus into this, I said sharply. Marcus told me not to sign. Lila stopped pacing. She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. Marcus? You talked to Marcus? I didn't answer. Great, she spat. So you are spreading your poison internally too. You are trying to stage a mutiny. I am trying to protect myself, I shouted back, finally losing my temper. You paid $12,000 to erase me. You wrote a note saying, prove she is nobody. How did you think I would react? Did you think I would just thank you for the privilege of being wiped out? I did what I had to do, Lila screamed, tears finally spilling over her lashes. That is what CEOs do. We make the hard calls. The investor said they wanted a clean cap table. I gave them a clean cap table. By lying, I said. By lying about your own sister. Lila slumped against the opposite wall, sliding down until she was crouching on the floor. She put her head in her hands. It is over. She sobbed. It is all over. What do you mean? I asked, the anger draining away, replaced by a sudden, cold fear. Lila looked up, her mascara smeared under her eyes. Harborline has a clause, she whispered, a zero-tolerance clause for undisclosed litigation risk. If they smell even a hint of a lawsuit, a hint of a dispute, they don't just renegotiate, they walk. She took a shuddering breath. They told me that on day one, we don't do drama. That is what Eleanor Park said. If there is a dispute, they pull the term sheet. All of it. The $3,200,000. It is gone. Natalie, it is gone because you couldn't just let me have this. I stared at her. The hallway seemed to spin. They haven't pulled it yet, I said weakly. Eleanor just said she would take it into consideration. Lila shook her head slowly. You don't understand them. They are ruthless. You just handed them the excuse they needed to back out or lowball me. She stood up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She looked at me, and her eyes were cold, colder than I had ever seen them. If this deal falls through, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, if I have to fire everyone, if I lose this company, I will never forgive you. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. You will be the person who destroyed the family success story because you were too selfish to stay in the background. She didn't wait for me to answer. She turned and walked down the stairs, her heels clicking on the concrete, a slow, rhythmic countdown. I stood in the hallway, clutching my keys. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I had wanted fairness. I had wanted acknowledgement. But as I stood there, listening to the fading sound of my sister's footsteps, I realized the price of the truth might be higher than I could pay. I unlocked my door and walked into my dark apartment. I went to the window and looked out at the street. I saw Lila's car pull away from the curb, screeching slightly as she accelerated. I looked at the binder on my table. Lumina Nest. Truth. It didn't look like a victory anymore. It looked like a weapon, and I had just fired it at the only people in the world who were supposed to matter. The summons from Harborline Capital was not a request. It was a mandate. 2 days after my phone call with Eleanor Park, a courier delivered a heavy packet to my apartment. It contained a notice of formal mediation, scheduled for Thursday morning at the Northbridge Dispute Resolution Center. The cover letter was polite but icy, stating that Harborline wished to exhaust all avenues of amicable resolution before making a final determination on the funding of Lumina Nest. I didn't want to go. The idea of sitting in a room with Lila, my parents, and a battery of lawyers made my stomach turn over. But Lucia was adamant. If you don't go, she had said, leaning over her desk, they will spin it. They will tell the investor you are obstructionist. They will say you are hiding. You have to show up. Natalie, you have to show them you are reasonable and that they are the ones who are afraid of the truth. So, on a gray Thursday morning that threatened rain but never quite delivered, I walked into the Resolution Center. It was a sterile building of glass and polished concrete, the kind of place designed to make human emotion feel like a zoning violation. The waiting room was an expanse of beige carpet and uncomfortable modern chairs. When I walked in, the air seemed to leave the room. Lila was there. She was sitting near the window, flanked by her entourage. To her left was Jason, the lead engineer I had helped interview 3 years ago. To her right was Sarah, the marketing director whose first press release I had copy-edited. They both looked up when I entered. Their expressions weren't just cold, they were accusing. Lila had clearly briefed them, in their eyes. I wasn't the woman who had set up their payroll systems. I was the obstacle standing between them and their stock options. I was the villain who wanted to crash the rocket ship just as it was taking off. And then there were my parents. Carol and Dennis sat on either side of Lila, like a protective detail. My mother was holding Lila's hand. rubbing her thumb over my sister's knuckles in a soothing rhythm. My father was staring at his phone, his jaw set in a hard line. When he saw me, he didn't smile, he didn't say hello. He just gave a curt nod, a gesture so minimal it was almost an insult. I sat on the opposite side of the room, next to Lucia. The distance between the two clusters of chairs was only about 15 feet, but it felt like a canyon. They look like a tribunal, I whispered to Lucia. They are a tribunal, Lucia murmured back, opening her briefcase. But we are not here for their verdict. We are here for the record. The door to the inner conference room opened. A mediator, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he had spent 40 years defusing bombs, beckoned us in. The room was large, dominated by a long oval table made of dark mahogany. Harborline's team was already seated at the far end. Eleanor Park sat in the center, flanked by two junior associates who looked like they slept in their suits. Lila and her team took the left side. My parents squeezed in behind them, in the second row of chairs, acting as a gallery. I sat on the right side with Lucia. Eleanor didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice carrying easily across the room. "As you know, Harborline Capital is in the final stages of underwriting a $3,200,000 investment in Lumina Nest. However, the emergence of undocumented historical claims regarding equity and intellectual property has created a pause in our process. We are here to resolve those claims today. If we cannot resolve them, Harborline will be forced to reconsider the viability of the transaction." Lila flinched. My father let out a heavy sigh. Eleanor slid a document across the table toward me. "This is our proposed settlement," she said. "We believe it is generous, given the lack of any written contract." Lucia took the document. She read it, her face impassive, then passed it to me. I looked at the numbers. Settlement amount, $50,000. Nature of payment, consultant fee for historical administrative support. Conditions: Natalie Simmons agrees to waive all future claims to equity, intellectual property, or employment. Public statement: Natalie Simmons affirms that Lila Simmons is the sole founder and creator of Lumina Nest. $50,000. It was more money than I had in my savings account. It was enough to pay off my car and put a down payment on a small condo. But as I read the text, I felt the nausea return. Consultant fee, administrative support. They were buying my silence. They were paying me to agree that I was nobody. I looked up at Lila. She was watching me intensely, her eyes pleading, "Take it." Her expression screamed, "Just take it and go away." I started, my voice failing me. My father leaned forward from the back row. "Natalie," he said, his voice a harsh whisper that cut through the silence. "It is $50,000. For doing some paperwork, you are getting money for basically nothing." Carol chimed in, her voice trembling. "Please, Natalie, don't be stubborn. Think about your sister. Think about her future. If you say yes, this whole nightmare is over. You can prove that you are not out to ruin her life." I looked at them. They honestly believed it. They believed I was the aggressor. They believed I was holding the family hostage. Lucia placed a hand on my arm. "We need a recess to review this," she announced. "Mr.?" Henderson nodded. 15 minutes. Lucia steered me into a small breakout room down the hall. As soon as the door clicked shut, the silence roared in my ears. "It is an insult," Lucia said flatly. "It is $50,000, I said, playing devil's advocate. Though the taste of ash was in my mouth, "It is hush money," Lucia corrected. "Look at Clause 7. She pointed to a paragraph I had missed. "Non-disparagement and confidentiality. Natalie Simmons agrees that she shall never, in perpetuity, discuss her contributions to Lumina Nest. The terms of this agreement, or the internal operations of the company with any third party, including but not limited to press, social media, or future employers." Lucia took off her glasses. "It is a gag order. Natalie, if you sign this, you can never put this work on your resume. You can never tell a future employer that you built an operations system from scratch. You effectively have a 4-year hole in your professional history. They aren't just buying your equity, they are buying your voice. I sank into a chair. They just want me gone. Lucia nodded. Yes, because you are the loose end. But $50,000 for a co-founder's stake in a company valued at $12 million post-money? It is pennies. If this goes to court, and we win, you could be looking at 10%. That is $1.2 million. I don't care about the $1 million, I said, burying my face in my hands. I just want them to stop lying about me. Then we don't sign. Lucia said. There was a knock on the door. It wasn't the mediator. It was Lila. She slipped inside before Lucia could stop her. Closing the door and leaning against it, she looked haggard up close. The foundation on her face was cracking, revealing the exhaustion underneath. Lila, you shouldn't be in here without your counsel, Lucia said sharply. I need 2 minutes with my sister, Lila said, her voice shaking. Alone. Lucia looked at me. I nodded slowly. It is okay. Lucia, give us a minute. Lucia hesitated, then gathered her files. I will be right outside. If she pressures you, you walk out. Lucia left. Lila and I stared at each other in the small, windowless room. 50,000 is a lot. Nat, Lila said softly, you could fix your car. You could take a trip. It is not about the money. Lila, I said, you know that. It is always about the money, she snapped, the softness vanishing. Don't give me that moral high ground garbage. You see a payday and you are grabbing for it. I stood up. I am not the one who paid a lawyer $12,000 to invent a legal strategy to erase my own sister. Lila reached into her blazer pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. You want to talk about erasure? She said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous register. Let's talk about narrative. She unfolded the paper and held it up. It was a draft press release. Lumina Nest resolves legacy claims. Moves forward with Series A. I scanned the text. Lila Simmons, founder of Lumina Nest, announced today the resolution of a nuisance claim brought by a former family affiliate. It is unfortunate when legacy baggage tries to weigh down innovation, Simmons said. But we are glad to put these doubtful claims behind us. Legacy baggage, doubtful claims, and this, Lila said, flipping the page. This is the talking point memo for my interview with TechCrunch next week. She pointed to a highlighted section. Q. There were rumors of a dispute with your sister? 8. Yes, it is a sad situation. My sister has struggled for a long time. She has always been a bit unstable. She creates these narratives to feel involved. We are just trying to get her the help she needs. I stared at the words. Unstable. Get her the help she needs. You wouldn't, I whispered. Lila's eyes were hard, glassy, and desperate. Mom and Dad agree. She said, they remember how you were in college. That semester you took off? The anxiety attacks? We can paint a picture, Nat, a picture of a jealous, mentally fragile big sister who invented a fantasy about running a company because she couldn't handle her own life. I felt the blood drain from my face. That semester in college I had taken off because I had mono and fell behind in my classes. They were going to weaponize that? They were going to rewrite my medical history to protect their investment? You are blackmailing me, I said. I am surviving, Lila hissed. This is business. If you don't take the $50,000 and sign the waiver, I release this. I will tell everyone you are crazy. I will tell everyone you are a liability. And who are they going to believe? The successful founder with the $3 million check, or the operations manager nobody has ever heard of? She stepped closer. Sign the paper. Natalie, take the money. Or I swear to God, I will destroy your reputation so thoroughly you won't be able to get a job at a grocery store. She turned and walked out, leaving the draft press release on the table. I stood there, shaking. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. I walked out of the breakout room. I needed air. I needed water. I went to the coffee station in the hallway. My hands were trembling so badly I couldn't grip the paper cup. Ms. Simmons. I jumped. Eleanor Park was standing by the water cooler. She looked perfectly composed, but her eyes were alert, scanning my face. I need a moment. I stammered. Take your time, Eleanor said. She poured herself a glass of water, taking a slow sip. Then she turned to me, her voice lowering so the associates down the hall couldn't hear. Mediation is a difficult process, she said. It reveals things. I didn't answer. I was afraid if I opened my mouth, I would scream. Harborline has been reviewing the data room again, Eleanor said casually, staring at a piece of abstract art on the wall. We noticed some discrepancies. I looked at her. Discrepancies? Between the internal documentation provided by the company and the narrative Miss Simmons has been presenting. Eleanor said, dates that don't match. File authors that seem to have been scrubbed. She turned her gaze to me. It was penetrating. My partners care about the product. Natalie, I care about the liability. But we both care about the truth. How this mediation resolves. How people behave in this room will weigh heavily on our final decision. She didn't smile. She just gave a slight nod and walked back toward the conference room. I stood there, watching her go. Dates that don't match. I took a deep breath. I walked back to Lucia. We are going back in, I said. What happened? Lucia asked, looking at my pale face. What did she say? She threatened to tell the press I am mentally unstable. I said, she threatened to ruin my career. Lucia's eyes narrowed. That is extortion. I know, I said, but I am not signing. I am not taking the $50,000. We are going to counter. We walked back into the main room. Lila was already seated, looking smug. My parents looked hopeful. Well? Dennis asked. Did you sign it? Lucia remained standing. We reject the offer. She stated clearly. The room erupted. What? Lila shouted. You can't reject it. It is $50,000. We reject the offer, Lucia repeated, her voice cutting through the noise. And we have a counter-proposal. She laid a new document on the table. Ms. Simmons will accept a settlement under the following conditions. 1. Acknowledgement of her role as a co-founding contributor in the company's official history. 2. An advisory equity stake of 5%, vesting over 4 years, contingent on the company hitting its revenue milestones. 3. No gag clause regarding her past work. Lila stood up, slamming her hands on the table. 5%? You are delusional. You are out of your mind. Lila, sit down, her lawyer hissed. No, Lila screamed. She's trying to steal my company. She did nothing. She ordered pizza and made spreadsheets. And now she wants 5% of a $12 million valuation? She is trying to bleed me dry. Mom, tell her. Lila turned to Carol. Tell her she is crazy. Carol looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. Natalie, please, 5%? That is taking food out of your sister's mouth. I am not taking anything. I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. I am asking for what I earned. You earned nothing, Lila yelled. You are nobody. You are a parasite. Mr. Henderson, the mediator, stood up. Let's calm down. Everyone. While Lila was shouting, I watched Lucia. She wasn't looking at Lila. She was looking at a stack of documents that Lila's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling from Alder and Brackett, had pushed across the table earlier. It was a pile of compliance evidence intended to show Harborline that the company was well run. Lucia frowned. She reached out and pulled a sheet from the middle of the stack. She held it up to the light. Mr. Sterling, Lucia said, her voice dropping to a register that instantly silenced the room. What is this? Mr. Sterling looked confused. It is the IP assignment file. We provided it to show that all other contractors have signed their waivers. Lucia looked at the document, then at me, then back at the document. This is a waiver, Lucia said, dated September 12th. So, Lila snapped, that is the standard contractor waiver. It is signed, Lucia said. Signed by whom? Eleanor Park asked, leaning forward. Lucia turned the document around so everyone could see the signature line. It is signed by Natalie Simmons, Lucia said. The room went dead silent. I stared at the paper. I could see the signature from where I sat. It was a loop, a sharp slant, and a dot. It looked like my signature. It looked very much like my signature. But I had never signed a waiver on September 12th. On September 12th, I was at a dentist appointment in the morning and a budget review in the afternoon. I remembered it clearly. I didn't sign that. I said, Lila's face went white. Not the pale of fear, but the chalky, bloodless gray of someone who has just realized the ground is gone. Of course you did, Lila stammered, but her voice lacked its usual fire. You must have forgotten. We did it at the kitchen table. Remember? When you brought over the cookies? I haven't been to the house in September. I said, I was on a business trip to Chicago the second week of September. I have the flight receipts. Lucia looked at Mr. Sterling. This document bears a notary stamp, Lucia said, pointing to the bottom of the page. From a notary in downtown Northbridge, Janet Weiss. Notary public. Lucia looked at me. Natalie, did you appear before a Janet Weiss on September 12th? I have never heard of Janet Weiss. I said. Eleanor Park stood up. She walked around the table. May I? She asked Lucia. Lucia handed her the document. Eleanor studied the signature. Then she studied the notary stamp. She pulled out her phone. I am going to make a call, Eleanor said, to the Secretary of State's Notary Division, and then to Ms. Weiss, Lila's lawyer. Mr. Sterling looked at his client. His face had gone from arrogant to horrified. Lila, he whispered, where did this document come from? Lila didn't answer. She was staring at the mahogany table, her hands gripping the edge so hard her fingernails were digging into the wood. My father looked at Lila. Lila? Dennis said. You said she signed everything months ago. You told me the new waiver was just a duplicate because the original was lost. Lila stayed silent. Lucia looked at the mediator. Mr. Henderson, she said, I believe we have a problem. My client is being asked to sign a settlement to waive claims she supposedly already waived in a document she never signed, which suggests that someone in this room has committed forgery. The word hung in the air like smoke. Forgery. It wasn't a civil dispute anymore. It wasn't a family argument. It was a felony. Lila looked up. Her eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them, only a terrified, pleading void, but I couldn't look away, and I couldn't save her. Eleanor Park stepped back into the room, phone in hand. The notary says she is on vacation in Florida, Eleanor said, her voice crisp and deadly. She says she has been there for 2 weeks, and she says she has never notarized a document for a Natalie Simmons. Eleanor looked at Lila, then at Mr. Sterling. This mediation is suspended, Eleanor announced. Harborline will be conducting an immediate forensic review of all documentation provided by Lumina Nest. Until then, no funds will be wired. She looked at me. Ms. Simmons, do not leave the building. We may need a handwriting sample. Lila let out a sound, a small, broken whimper. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. I sat there, staring at the fake signature that was supposed to bury me. It was a good forgery. Lila had practiced. She had probably practiced on the back of a napkin, just like she used to practice my signature to forge sick notes in high school. But this wasn't high school. And the bell wasn't going to ring to save her. The silence in the mediation room was not the quiet of a library or a church. It was the suffocating, static-charged silence of a bomb shelter right after the siren has cut off. The air conditioner hummed a low, indifferent monotone that seemed to scrape against my nerves. Lucia remained standing, her finger pressing down on the document that lay in the center of the mahogany table, the paper, a waiver of rights, supposedly signed by me on September 12th, looked innocuous from a distance. Just black text on white paper, but up close, it was a landmine. This document is a fabrication, Lucia said. Her voice was level, stripped of any theatricality. It was the voice of a lawyer who knows she has just found the thread that unravels the entire sweater. Mr. Sterling, Lila's attorney from Alder and Brackett, looked as if he had swallowed a stone. He picked up the paper, his hands trembling slightly. and stared at the signature. Fabrication is a strong word. Ms. Heron, Sterling said. Though his voice lacked conviction, it is possible there is simply a confusion of dates. Memories are fallible. My client's memory is not the issue, Lucia countered. The issue is that this document bears a notary stamp from a Janet Weiss, based in downtown Northbridge, dated September 12th. My client was in Chicago on September 12th. We have flight manifests, hotel receipts, and credit card statements to prove it. She physically could not have been in Janet Weiss's office. All eyes turned to Lila. She was sitting perfectly still, her posture rigid, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that the skin over her knuckles was translucent. She didn't look at me. She stared at a point on the wall somewhere above Eleanor Park's head. "Lila," my father whispered. His voice was hoarse. "Lila, say something. Tell them it is a mistake." Lila blinked. A slow, mechanical movement. It must be a mix-up with the filing," she said. Her voice was thin, like paper tearing. Natalie came over. In September. We were at the kitchen table. Mom and Dad were there. She signed a bunch of papers. I probably just misdated it when I took it to get notarized later. She looked at me then, her eyes wide and pleading, begging me to step into the lie with her. "You remember, right, Nat? You came over for lasagna. You signed the contractor agreement. You said you didn't want to make a fuss." I looked at my sister. I looked at the desperation etched into the lines around her mouth. For a second, I felt the old reflex kick in, the instinct to smooth things over, to fix the problem, to take the blame so Lila could shine. I could say yes. I could say I forgot. I could say the date was wrong. But then I thought of the $12,000. I thought of the invoice for reputational risk review. I thought of the phrase, "prove she is nobody." "No, Lila," I said quietly. "I didn't come over for lasagna in September. I haven't been to the house since August for Dad's birthday, and I never signed a waiver." Lila's face crumpled. "You are lying," she shrilled, the sound shocking in the quiet room. "You are lying to sabotage me." Eleanor Park stood up. Her movements were precise, almost military. She gestured to the junior associate at her side, a young man with a laptop who had been typing furiously. "Check the notary," Eleanor said. "Now." The associate nodded and slipped out of the room, phone in hand. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing us back in the vacuum. For 3 minutes, nobody spoke. My mother was weeping softly, a jagged, rhythmic sound that tore at my heart. Dennis was staring at the table, his face gray. Lila was breathing in short, shallow gasps. I looked at Lucia. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. "Hold the line." The door opened. The associate walked back in. He looked pale. He walked straight to Eleanor and whispered something in her ear. Eleanor listened, her expression unmoving. She nodded once. She turned to face the table. "Ms. Weiss is currently in Boca Raton, Florida," Eleanor announced. "She has been there since the 1st of September visiting her grandchildren. She has not notarized any documents in Northbridge for 6 weeks. Furthermore, she stated on the phone that she does not know a Natalie Simmons and has no record of this transaction in her logbook." The air left the room completely. "This is not a clerical error," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze water. "This is a fraudulent instrument. Mr. Sterling closed his eyes. He knew, in that moment, that his career was flashing before his eyes. He had submitted a forged document to an investor during due diligence. Even if he didn't know it was forged, his firm was now radioactive. "Harbor Line is suspending all activity regarding this transaction," Eleanor said, gathering her files. "We are issuing an immediate stop on the funding wire. We will not be proceeding until a full forensic audit of the chain of title is completed." "Wait," Lila stood up, knocking her chair back. "You can't do that. We have payroll on Friday. We have vendors waiting for checks. If you don't wire the money, we bounce checks. We go under. That is not our concern at this moment." "Ms. Simmons," Eleanor said, Our concern is that we have been presented with forged legal documents. Please, Lila begged, reaching across the table. Eleanor, please, it is just a misunderstanding. I can fix it. I can get a new waiver. Natalie will sign a new one right now. Won't you? Nat? She looked at me, her eyes wild. Sign it. Natalie, sign a new one. Tell them it is okay. I stayed seated. I didn't move. Eleanor didn't even look at Lila. She looked at me. Ms. Simmons. Eleanor said, "My team will be in touch." Harborline's team walked out. The door swung shut. The room descended into chaos. Lila turned on me, screaming, incoherent accusations about jealousy and spite. My mother was sobbing into her hands. My father was shouting at Mr. Sterling to do something. Lucia grabbed my arm. "We are leaving," she said. "Now." We walked out, leaving the wreckage behind us. I didn't look back, but leaving the room didn't mean I had escaped. By the time I got back to my apartment, the shockwave had hit the company. Lila must have called the office immediately, or maybe the CFO saw the funding hold notification and panicked. My phone started buzzing at 4 o'clock and didn't stop. The first text was from Jason, the lead engineer. "Nat, is it true? Did you really block the funding?" Then Sarah, the marketing director. "We are hearing the deal is dead because you sued the company. Natalie, I have a mortgage. Please tell me this isn't real." Then a voicemail from the office manager. A woman named Brenda, who I had hired myself 2 years ago. I listened to it on speakerphone. Standing in my kitchen, still wearing my mediation suit. "Natalie, it is Brenda. Lila just called. She is hysterical. She says you accused her of fraud to get a bigger payout, and now Harborline walked away. She says we might not make payroll on Friday. I don't know what is going on, but I have 2 kids in daycare. If I don't get paid, I am in trouble. Please, whatever you want, just take it. Don't punish us." I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. Lila was spinning it. Of course she was. She wasn't telling them about the forgery. She wasn't telling them about the $12,000 hit job. She was telling them that I was the greedy, vindictive sister who torpedoed the lifeboat because I wasn't the captain. I was the villain. In their story, I was the monster. Another text came in. This one was from a number I didn't recognize, probably one of the new sales hires. "Hope you enjoy your money while we are all filing for unemployment." Selfish. I threw my phone across the room. It landed on the sofa with a soft thud. The guilt was a physical weight, heavier than the anger, heavier than the betrayal. These were real people. I knew them. I knew their coffee orders. I knew their kids' names. I had set up the health insurance plan they were all terrified of losing. If I held my ground, the company might collapse. Lila would be ruined. My parents would never speak to me again. 12 people would lose their jobs. And for what? For my pride? For 5% equity that I would probably never see anyway? Maybe I should just sign. The thought seduced me. I could call Eleanor. I could say, "I am sorry. I was confused. I will sign whatever you want." I could save them. I could be the hero by being the martyr. It was the role I had played my whole life. The fixer. The one who absorbs the damage so everyone else can stay whole. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had finally started, streaking the glass with gray tears. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't paid to be on my side. I picked up my phone and texted Marcus. "Coffee? I need a sanity check." He replied instantly. "Meet me at the Grind. 10 minutes. The Grind was a small, independent shop halfway between my apartment and the Lumina Nest office. It was neutral ground. When I walked in, Marcus was already there, sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a black coffee. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. I sat down opposite him. "I didn't order anything." "Is it true?" Marcus asked quietly. "About the funding?" Harborline suspended the wire. I said. Marcus nodded slowly. "The Slack channels are on fire. Lila sent a company-wide email 10 minutes ago. She said, 'Unforeseen legal obstruction from a legacy affiliate has paused the round.' She didn't use your name, but she might as well have put your picture on a wanted poster." I looked down at the scratched wooden table. She forged my signature. Marcus. Marcus froze, his cup halfway to his mouth. What? She forged a waiver. I whispered. She presented a document to the investors that claimed I signed away my rights in September. But the notary she used was in Florida. Harborline caught it. That is why they suspended the deal. Not because I am suing, because they found out she committed fraud. Marcus set his cup down. The ceramic made a sharp click against the wood. Jesus. He breathed. Lila? I nodded. I guess she was desperate. Or maybe she just thought I was so insignificant that she could impersonate me and no one would notice. Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair. And now she is blaming you. She is telling everyone I am extortionist. I said, Brenda left me a voicemail crying about her daycare bills. Marcus, I am thinking about folding. Marcus looked at me sharply. Folding? I can call Harborline, I said, my voice rising in desperation. I can tell them I found the waiver. I can tell them I remembered signing it. I can take the fall. If I do that, the money flows. Everyone gets paid. The company survives. And you? Marcus asked. What happens to you? I go back to being nobody. I said, but at least I am not the reason 12 people lose their livelihoods. Marcus leaned forward. He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was firm, warm, and grounding. Natalie, look at me. I looked up. Do you actually want Lumina Nest to succeed? Of course I do. I said, I helped build it. No. Marcus said, do you want this Lumina Nest to succeed? A company built on a foundation of lies? A company led by a CEO who creates false documents to cheat her own sister? A company that pays $12,000 to erase its history? I don't know. If you sign that paper, Marcus said, his voice low and intense, you aren't saving the company. You are poisoning it. You are telling Lila that there are no consequences. You are telling her that she can use people, chew them up, and spit them out, and if she gets caught, you will step in and clean up the mess. He let go of my hand and leaned back. You showed me that email once, the one where she said, "This is our company." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. If it is your company, Marcus said, then you have a responsibility to it, and your responsibility is to not let it be run by a criminal. Is it fair for you to carry the weight of everyone's dreams when they refuse to even see your humanity? Brenda doesn't know the truth. Sarah doesn't know. But you do. But the payroll, I whispered. Payroll is Lila's problem, Marcus said sternly. She is the CEO. She broke the deal. Not you. You are the victim here. Natalie, stop acting like the perpetrator. I looked out the window at the rain. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about the handwritten note. Prove she is nobody. Marcus was right. If I took the fall, I wasn't being noble. I was being an accomplice. I went home. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't answer the calls. I turned my phone off and put it in a drawer. The next morning, the world didn't end, but it certainly tilted on its axis. At 9 o'clock, Lucia called me. I just got off the phone with Eleanor Park. Lucia said, her voice was brisk, energized. Harborline's internal investigation is moving fast. They contacted the Florida notary again. She sent a sworn affidavit this morning stating she has never met you and never notarized that document. So it is confirmed, I said, gripping the phone. It is confirmed, Lucia said. Eleanor also told me something else. They had a forensic document expert look at the scan. They found digital artifacts suggesting the signature was lifted from an old birthday card or a check and superimposed onto the PDF. It wasn't just a scribble. Natalie, it was a cut-and-paste job. I felt a wave of nausea. A birthday card. She had taken a card I had written her, probably one saying, "Happy birthday. Love you so much," and she had stolen my name from it to sign away my rights. What happens now? I asked. Harborline has sent a formal notice to Lumina Nest. Lucia said, they are demanding a full explanation. Specifically, they have asked for a detailed timeline of who instructed Alder and Brackett to produce the waiver, who submitted it to the data room, and, this is the big one, why a $12,000 invoice for reputational review was billed to the company regarding a family member. They are connecting the dots. I said, they have connected them. Lucia said, they know Lila is lying, but they need the final piece. They need to know the intent. They are asking if we have any additional context regarding the reputational review. I closed my eyes. I saw the binder on my desk, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and the cover letter with the handwritten note. Lucia, I said, I have the context. I know you do. Lucia said softly. The question is, are you ready to use it? If we send this, Natalie, there is no going back. This proves premeditation. It moves this from desperate mistake to calculated conspiracy. It could expose Lila to criminal fraud charges. I thought about the employees' texts. I thought about Marcus. Stop acting like the perpetrator. If I stayed silent, I was protecting a lie. Send it. I said, no, wait. I will send it directly to Eleanor. I want her to hear it from me. You are sure? I am sure. I hung up. I sat down at my computer. I opened my email client and composed a new message to Eleanor Park. Subject: Supplemental documentation regarding Lumina Nest due diligence. Dear Ms. Park, in light of the recent discrepancies regarding the waiver document, I believe it is necessary to provide full context regarding my erasure from the company history. Attached is a folder containing the original correspondence between myself and the founder, proving the promise of equity. More importantly, attached is the invoice and cover letter from Alder and Brackett, which was inadvertently forwarded to me. Please pay special attention to the handwritten note on the final page of the invoice packet. I clicked the paperclip icon. I attached the file named luminanest_truth_binder, PDF. I hesitated for a moment. My finger hovered over the mouse. I thought of Lila at the dinner table, raising a glass of champagne, calling herself a solo founder. I thought of her in the hallway, screaming that I was unstable. I wasn't doing this to destroy her. I was doing this to prove I existed. I clicked send. The progress bar filled with blue. Sent. I sat back in my chair. The room was quiet. The rain had stopped. 10 minutes later, my phone, which I had turned back on, rang. It wasn't Lucia. It wasn't Lila. It was Eleanor Park. Ms. Simmons, she said. Ms. Park, I have received your file, she said. Her voice was different than I had ever heard it. It wasn't the cool corporate tone, and it wasn't the inquisitive tone from the first call. It sounded stunned. I am looking at the note. She said. I knew which note she meant. I need you to prove she is legally nobody. Ms. Simmons, Eleanor said slowly. Harborline Capital has seen a lot of ugly things in business. We have seen embezzlement. We have seen corporate espionage. But I have never seen a founder pay a law firm to legally annihilate the existence of their own sibling. She paused. This changes the conversation. This is no longer about a disputed waiver. This is about the fundamental moral viability of the leadership team. What are you going to do? I asked. We are calling a final meeting, she said. Tomorrow morning, we are summoning the entire board, the legal counsel, and the founder. We would like you to be there. I don't know if I can face her. I said, you don't have to face her alone, Eleanor said, but this story started with you. It needs to end with you. We need you to verify the authenticity of this note in person. I looked at the blank wall of my apartment. I was tired. I was so tired of fighting. But I had come this far. I will be there, I said. I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt a heavy, somber clarity. The truth was out. The binder was open. And tomorrow, everyone would have to read it. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Harborline Capital building was the longest vertical journey of my life. It was a glass elevator, offering a panoramic view of Northbridge, the city where I had grown up, the city where I had built a company I no longer owned, and the city where my family was about to shatter. I stood in the back corner. Lucia Heron stood next to me, her briefcase heavy with the evidence that would likely end my sister's career. Lila stood near the doors, flanked by Mr. Sterling and a senior partner from Alder and Brackett, who had been called in for damage control. My parents were there too, huddled close to Lila, whispering reassurances that sounded more like prayers. Lila didn't look at me. She was wearing a white power suit, crisp and sharp, but her hands were trembling so violently she had to clasp them together to stop the shaking. The doors slid open with a soft chime. We were ushered into a conference room that made the mediation center look like a break room. It was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The table was a slab of gray slate, cold and imposing. Eleanor Park was there, seated at the center. To her right was a man I didn't recognize, a silver-haired partner with eyes like flint. To her left was another partner, a woman with a notebook and a pen that looked like it cost more than my car. "Please, sit," the silver-haired man said. His voice was low, devoid of warmth. We took our seats. The silence was absolute. There was no coffee service today, no water pitchers, just the slate table and the terrifying weight of accountability. "I am Robert Vance," the senior partner said. "I oversee the Venture Risk Committee for Harborline." He opened a folder in front of him. He didn't look at Lila. He looked at the papers. "We are here," Vance continued, "to make a final determination regarding the Series A financing for Lumina Nest. Normally, this is a celebratory meeting. Today, it is a foreclosure on the truth." Lila flinched as if he had slapped her. "Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Mr. Vance, if I may, there has been a great deal of misunderstanding regarding the documentation. My client is prepared to offer a revised cap table that includes a generous settlement for Miss Natalie Simmons to resolve these legacy issues." Vance raised a hand. He didn't look up. "We are past settlements. Mr. Sterling, we are establishing the record." Vance picked up a sheet of paper. Timeline. He read, 2021 to 2023. Natalie Simmons contributes substantive operational labor, capital, and intellectual property to the founding of Lumina Nest. Contemporaneous emails confirm a promise of equity. Is this disputed? Mr. Sterling hesitated. "We argue the nature of the contribution was familial assistance, not—" Vance cut him off. "Supported by metadata, supported by bank records, supported by the founder's own written admission in email correspondence. Next point?" He flipped the page. October 22nd, 2025. Lumina Nest engages Alder and Brackett for a specific service. The invoice amounts to $12,000. The line item reads, "Reputational and legal risk review focusing on Natalie Simmons." Vance looked up then, his eyes locking onto Lila. "Ms. Simmons," he said, "you spent $12,000 of company capital, investor capital, to research how to neutralize your sister. Is that correct?" Lila opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Mr. Sterling, who was staring at the table. I was protecting the company," Lila whispered. Vance ignored her. He flipped another page. October 24th. A waiver is presented to the data room. It bears the signature of Natalie Simmons and the stamp of a notary. Janet Weiss. Forensic analysis confirms the signature is a digital transposition from an unrelated personal document. The notary confirms she was in Florida and has never met the signatory. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Dennis shifted in his chair, looking at Lila with a dawning horror. "Forgery," Vance said. "A felony. A deliberate fabrication of a legal instrument submitted to a financial institution to induce investment." "It wasn't me," Lila blurted out, her voice cracking. It was an administrative error. Someone on the team must have—" "Stop," Vance said. The word was a command. He reached into the folder and pulled out the final document. It was the invoice cover sheet, the one with the handwritten note. "We received a supplemental submission from Ms. Natalie Simmons yesterday," Vance said. It included a scan of the instructions sent to Alder and Brackett. He held up the paper. He adjusted his glasses and read aloud, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "I need you to prove she is legally nobody to Lumina Nest, so my investor doesn't freak out." The words hung in the air. "Prove she is legally nobody." Vance lowered the paper. He looked directly at Lila. "Is this how you see your sister?" Ms. Simmons? As nobody? Lila was shaking. Her face was a mask of panic and fury. She looked at Vance. Then she looked at me. And in that moment, the fear broke, replaced by something uglier. Something she had been holding back for years. Yes, Lila shouted. The room recoiled. Yes, she repeated, standing up. She is nobody. Look at her. She is a mid-level manager at a trucking company. She doesn't have the vision. She doesn't have the grit. Lila, sit down. Mr. Sterling hissed. I won't sit down, Lila screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You want to know why I did it? Because real entrepreneurs can't drag dead weight. She held me back with her constant worrying. Is this legal? Is this in the budget? She suffocated me. She turned to Vance, her eyes wild. I built this. Me. I did the pitches. I took the rejection. She sat at home safe with her salary while I risked everything. She isn't a founder. She is just the help. And you don't give the help 50% of the company. She was panting, her chest heaving. I tried to pay her off. I offered her $50,000. That is more money than she has ever seen. But she is jealous. She has always been jealous because I am the one who shines, and she is the one who fades into the wallpaper. Lila stopped, realizing suddenly that the room was dead silent. She looked at our parents. Carol was staring at her with her mouth open, tears streaming down her face. Dennis looked like he had been punched in the gut. Lila looked back at Vance, waiting for him to understand, waiting for him to nod and say, yes, of course, the strong must eat the weak. Vance closed the folder. The sound was like a gavel strike. Harborline Capital manages $4 billion in assets, Vance said quietly. We invest in technology. We invest in markets. But primarily, Ms. Simmons, we invest in character. He stood up. We cannot back a deal founded on the idea that you can simply pay to make people nobody. Lila froze. What? She whispered. The investment is withdrawn. Vance said, the term sheet is void. We are terminating all negotiations effective immediately. No, Lila gasped. You can't. The money. The payroll. Vance turned to his partners. We are done here. But wait. Lila's attorney jumped up. Mr. Vance, surely we can restructure. We can remove Ms. Simmons from the CEO role. We are done, Vance repeated. He looked at me. His expression softened. Just a fraction. Ms. Natalie Simmons, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I am sorry it came to this. He walked out of the room, followed by his team. Eleanor Park was the last to leave. She stopped at the door, looked at me, gave a brief, respectful nod, and exited. We were left alone in the silent conference room. The $3,200,000 was gone. The dream was dead. Lila stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty chair where Vance had sat. Then she slowly sank back into her seat, burying her face in her hands. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, hollow sadness. I stood up. Lucia gathered her files. Let's go, Lucia said softly. We walked toward the door. Natalie! It was my mother! Carol scrambled out of her chair and ran across the room, grabbing my arm. Her grip was tight, painful. Are you happy? Carol cried, her face blotchy and distorted. Are you happy now? You destroyed it. You destroyed your sister's future. Mom, I said, trying to pull away. She worked so hard, Carol sobbed, shaking me. She was going to be someone. And you? You just couldn't let it go. You couldn't just step aside. You had to ruin everything because you are so selfish. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had sat at the mediation table and told me to take the hush money. I didn't ruin it. Mom, I said, my voice steady. Lila did. She broke the law. She lied. She was under pressure. Carol screamed. She made a mistake. You are her sister. You are supposed to protect her. I looked past Carol to my father. Dennis was standing by the window, looking out at the gray harbor. He hadn't moved to comfort Lila. He hadn't moved to yell at me. Dad? I said. Dennis turned slowly. He looked old, older than I had ever seen him. He looked at Lila, who was still slumped at the table, weeping into her arms. Lila, Dennis said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Lila didn't look up. Did you forge it? Dennis asked. Did you really forge the signature? Lila didn't answer. She just cried harder, a sound of pure, self-pitying misery. Dennis looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a terrible, crushing disappointment, not at me, at the world, at the lie he had been living. He walked over to Carol and gently peeled her fingers off my arm. Come on, Carol, he said. Let's go home. But Natalie, Carol started. Let's go home, Dennis repeated firmly. He guided her toward the door. As he passed me, he paused. He looked like he wanted to say something. Perhaps I'm sorry, or perhaps, good job, but the words didn't come. He just shook his head and walked out, taking my mother with him. Lila was left alone at the slate table with her lawyers, who were already packing up their briefcases, their faces grim with the knowledge that they would likely never be paid. I looked at my sister one last time. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream at her. But all I saw was a person who had believed her own press release so deeply that she had forgotten how to be human. Goodbye, Lila, I whispered. She didn't answer. I walked out of the Harbor Line building and into the cool, clean air of the street. It was over. The collapse of Lumina Nest was slow and quiet, like a balloon losing air. Without the Harbor Line funding, the payroll bounced 3 days later. Lila tried to spin it as a banking error, but the rumors were already spreading. The forensic audit request had triggered alerts in the investor community. Word got out that the cap table was toxic and that the founder had committed document fraud. Within 2 weeks, the layoffs began. I stayed away. I didn't go to the office. I didn't drive past the building. But my phone became a confessional booth for the people I used to work with. Jason, the engineer, texted me. I get it now. Marcus told me about the waiver. I'm sorry I doubted you. Brenda, the office manager, called me in tears, not to blame me, but to apologize for the voicemail she had left. She lied to us. Brenda said she looked us in the eye and lied. But not everyone was kind. There were still late-night messages from anonymous numbers, friends of Lila's, calling me a traitor and a snake. I deleted them without reading. Lila vanished from social media. The founder visionary bio disappeared from her profiles. I heard from a cousin that she had moved back in with Mom and Dad in Westfield Heights, and that the house was a war zone of silence and accusations. I didn't visit. 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in December, I sat in a co-working space near the river. It was a modest place, full of freelancers and small startups. The coffee was cheap, the internet was fast, and nobody knew my last name. I was working on a project for a new client, a local logistics firm that needed a complete operational overhaul. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't a unicorn startup, but it was real work, for real pay. And the contract had my name on it. Natalie Simmons, consultant. I took a sip of my coffee and looked out the window. The river was moving steadily, indifferent to the dramas of the people on its banks. A notification popped up on my laptop screen. New email. I clicked on it. From Eleanor Park. Subject: Exploring a new idea. My heart did a small, strange flip. I opened the message. Dear Ms. Simmons, I hope this note finds you well. As you know, Harbor Line has closed its file on Lumina Nest. However, during our due diligence, my team was consistently impressed by the underlying operational architecture of the product, the systems, the compliance frameworks, and the scalability protocols. We understand that this was your work. Harbor Line is currently incubating a new venture in the logistics software space. We are looking for an operations director who values precision, integrity, and character. We are not looking for a rock star. We are looking for a builder. If you are interested, I would like to buy you coffee. Best. Eleanor. I stared at the email. Operations Director, Harbor Line Capital. It was the kind of validation I had craved for 4 years. It was the proof that I was somebody. I looked at the cursor blinking on the screen. I could reply. I could step into that world, the world of high finance, big stakes, and sleek offices. I could finally be the one with the power, or I could finish the proposal in front of me. I could build my own small consultancy. I could answer to no one but myself. I didn't reply immediately. I let the email sit there, an unread promise of a different future. I looked out at the city. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Lila Simmons' sister. I wasn't the invisible hand. I wasn't the fix-it girl. I was Natalie. And for the first time, that was enough. I closed my laptop, packed my bag, and walked out into the winter sun. The air was cold, but it felt good. It felt like freedom. Thank you so much for listening to Sister Paid $12,000 to Prove I'm Nobody. This story of Natalie and Lila explores the painful reality of how family dynamics can be weaponized in business, and how the people who do the real work are often erased by those who chase the spotlight. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from New York, London, Sydney, or somewhere else? Please leave a comment below with your location. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas about betrayal, justice, and family secrets, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more emotional journeys coming your way. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Did Natalie make the right choice by exposing her sister? Or is family loyalty more important than the truth? Share your opinion in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.